I think we will kick things off. So, without further ado, my name is Kelly Scott, Director of the Farm Robotics Challenge. Um, we've got a really interesting session for you here today, and it represents the focus we'd like to have in the winter, spring months here on preparing you to put your best foot forward with the competition and the deliverables we're looking for in the form of your 5-minute video and your written report. So the content of this presentation is going to be all about the video, your composition, how you could think about capturing footage and presenting yourself in the best manner. And I'm really thrilled to have our resident expert here, Ethan Ireland, who's the UC videographer and documentary filmmaker, to kind of guide you through the thought process of how you want to organize your video shoot and what you want to capture and portray for your project. So before I hand it over to Ethan, want to also say we have another webinar coming up in just a couple weeks, and that will be in collaboration with folks from Plug and Play. And we are going to have 4 startup founder members from their mentor network talk to you all about how to pitch, how to present your projects in a compelling way. And they are also going to offer themselves up as mentors for the different teams that would like to have what you're putting together critiqued before you submit it to the competition. So I would highly encourage you all to consider that opportunity. These are, experts and professionals in their field that are giving their valuable time to help you grow as students and learn. So more to come on that. That'll be March 12th. But for today, I'm going to hand over things to Ethan to take away. Ethan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before you get started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Ethan Ireland. I am, I have almost 30 years in the film and television industry. I've worked on 18 feature films, about 30 different broadcast television series. I have 150 episodes of the hit YouTube series Smosh, and an award-winning documentary about a brain scientist named Jay Gunkelman. I've been working for UC Ag and Natural Resources now for going on 4 years, where I've been producing science communication content and documentaries, some of which have also won some awards. So I have a little bit of experience in media production. Struggling with making the jump to social media because I don't feel like that content is, as any older person does, to switching to a new paradigm, I guess. Does anybody have any questions for me before we get started on the lecture? No? All righty.
I don't see anything in the chat, Ethan. It's mostly the AIs talking. So I say take it away.
Okay, and before anybody asks, yes, this is my office. These are only 2 of the 5 movie posters that I have in it. The other 3 are The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, The Lighthouse, and Wizards. So, yeah, I'm a huge movie nerd in addition to being somebody who makes movies for a living. Alrighty, so I'm going to get us started here with the lecture. I call this Persistence of Vision, because that phenomenon by which you are able to see movies is called persistence of vision. So before we start, I don't want to hear anybody tell me that they're not artistic, because being an artist is being human, right? It is a trait of our species. So we tell stories, we dance, we sing, and we make art. Part of being human is making art. All children, even those with special needs, make art. And but the thing is, if you don't believe you're an artist, you won't be an artist. If you tell yourself, I can't do it, then you will have quit before you've given yourself the chance. So we have conditioned ourselves in American culture to think that if it is not your soul living doing the thing, then it's a waste of your time. But that's all, the way what I tell people is like, if you're not an Olympic athlete, is it still worth your time to exercise? In this case, yes. So there's nothing magical or ineffable about it. It's simply a technical skill that can be learned and refined through practice, and it's how much practice you give it that determines how good you get at it, because it's not practice makes perfect, it's practice makes permanent. So if you practice telling yourself you're not an artist, then that's what you get good at. So yes, you're an artist. Now let's get cracking. Great. All right, so if you get nothing else from this lecture, I want you to take away these 3 key points. 1, plan, plan, plan. I want you to thoroughly develop your idea, plan your strategy, and build your team before you even think about picking up a camera, right? Everybody's in such a rush to go get to their camera and then commit it. Well, no, make a plan, right? Number 2, build your frame with intent, because it is your responsibility to show your audience what is important to the story you're telling. I'm going to show you how to do that, but that's the number 2 thing. You're going to build your frame with intent. Number 3, make strong choices, because motion pictures traffic in emotion. Strong creative choices keep your audience invested. So 1, make a plan. 2, build your frame with intent. 3, make strong choices. Moving on. So we're going to talk about the most important step, which is organization and preparation. So I want to tell you first, videos are used primarily to inspire and influence, not inform and educate. Your audience needs to be emotionally engaged first, otherwise they will lose the message. Number 2, because they traffic in emotion, they must traffic in emotion because we evolved to feel before we think. The limbic system is upstream from the rational, the prefrontal cortex, meaning you feel your feelings and then you rationalize them second. Motion pictures take advantage of that fact, and if you want to influence people to finance your project, you're going to need to hook them by emotion first. Finally, you use images and symbols to speak to the emotional brain. That's why you can watch films in any language. Even if you don't speak the language, you're going to get the story that they're telling you if they're telling the story right. So let's talk about the plan you're going to build. Again, these are complex things. I'm going to read the slides because you need to see it, hear it, do it in order to be able to get it stuck in your brain. So like I told you a minute ago, don't be in a rush to pick up your camera. Develop your idea first. It's crucial because you need to articulate your idea to yourself first, because you are your own first audience. If you can't articulate your idea to yourself, you're never going to be able to articulate your idea to an audience. So spend some time. Take that time. That's vital time that it's going to take for you to be able to tell your story. It will take some time, and it might take a long time, but spend time thinking about it, writing it down, developing it so you can articulate it clearly. And then eventually, you're going to talk to your team second. So one of the ways you do that is by asking some basic questions. When people tell you the who, what, when, where, why. Well, that's what I'm going to tell you. Number 1, who am I talking to? Who is your target audience? What demographic are you trying to reach? And how do they communicate? Be as specific as possible, right? So if we're talking about, I have this right here on my slide. If you're talking about blockbusters between 1975 and 2015, these were suburban white males aged 12 to 24 because they have a big bunch of time, and they have the time and the money to spend going to watch movies in theaters, right? But that's one demographic for one type of media product and one particular distribution environment. Yours may be very different, so figure out who you're talking to. Number 2, where does your audience live? Where are you going to be talking to them, right? Your audiences for cinema or television or video on demand or social media are very different. Which social media platform is also very different, right? The expectations of a TikTok video are very different from the expectations of a YouTube Reel or YouTube Shorts or a Instagram Reels or LinkedIn, right? These different audiences, even if it's social media, technically, each audience has a different set of expectations. That's going to dictate the content that you make, the format, the length, the style, right? TikTok demands a very, I would call it, low production value. They want things to feel, quote, authentic, right? By authentic, that would be how I would describe it, as trashy, but that's what audiences there expect. So that's going to dictate how you tell your story, is where you talk to them. Know why you're saying it in the first place, right? What is the goal? Do I want to inspire people right? Do I want to inspire them to go do research about a particular topic? Do I want them to change their behavior? Do I want to make money, right? Do I want to get investors for my product, or to invest in my project? Knowing your motivation is really helpful if you want to formulate goals to achieve actions. You want your audience to take an action, know what your goals are and what action you want them to take, because that's what you're trying to do, right? And if you want to do that, you need to know what your audience should take away, right? Like, what is the call to action you want them to engage in? Nothing's guaranteed, but you'll be more likely to achieve the goals of those get your audience to take things away. If you plan. And finally, what's the pitch, right? Once you've thought all this stuff out, then you write your pitch, right? You think about this when folks talk about your elevator pitch in 30 seconds. Summarize your idea as briefly as you can. Brief sentences. And really, I want to stress, brevity is important. You can encapsulate your idea in a single sentence, right? Like Titanic, if you've ever seen that movie. I'm guessing the younger folks here probably haven't. But Titanic was pitched as Romeo and Juliet on a boat. You don't need to say anymore. You got it, right? The movie Aliens was pitched as Vietnam in space. There you go, right? You need to be able to get it as concisely as you can. So once you've developed your plan, we're going to develop it a little further. You've established what you're saying to whom and how and where you're talking to them. So you're going to expand this a little bit from beyond just this elevator pitch, single sentence, Romeo and Juliet on a boat kind of thing. You're going to write an extended summary, 1 to 2 paragraphs, like you might find on the back of a DVD case or on a VOD thing when you click the more button to tell you more about this. Do I want to invest the hour in watching the Fallout show? Is this something that's going to be interesting to me? Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, this sounds kind of cool. I'll watch it. Expand your summary to a treatment. Okay, if you're writing a narrative project, like a feature film or something like that, this would be a prose version. This would be like the short story or the novelization of the movie. If you're doing a documentary, this is where you state your intent and you demonstrate your preliminary research. Say, you write this down. You give your topic so you know why you're covering this at all. Once you've done that, then you create your script, or what you might call your story goals, because not every film has a script, right? Sometimes it's a 2-column script where you have the shots you want to get and the statements you want to have on the other side in 2 columns, right? Like what shot is covering what statement. You might have a screenplay, a classic screenplay format if you've ever seen that. You might just have a list of story beats that you want to hit, because if you're interviewing people for a documentary, they're not going to be saying lines like they're an actor. Ideally, they won't be, at least. Otherwise, it's, documentaries are not journalism, and the people you're talking to usually aren't actors. So you have a list of things that you hope to get out of them, and then a list of interview questions that you might use to elicit their statements that you can then use in editing that further your story goal, right? So that's where you would also have your interviewees, who you think is going to be telling those parts of the story the best. So, if you're doing an interview about fire science, right, you might be talking to the head, like the person who's in charge of, like, who knows how wildfires spread the best. You might talk to people who've been involved in putting out wildfires, and anyway, so you get the idea. But you give your list of interviewees and what parts of the story they're telling and what you're hoping to get them to say, because you are backfilling the story you intend to tell before you go ask those questions in a documentary. And this is why I'm telling you documentaries are not journalism. I'm going to say this a bunch of times, okay? So how does this fit your project? Well, you know what story you want to tell about your project. You know what story you want to tell about, your robotics challenge, right? You know that. So now you have to figure out who's going to tell those pieces in a convincing way, and why do I want to talk to them? We'll look at a video later from the team in Hawaii and how they put that together. Finally, you're going to do a breakdown. This is where you basically make a bunch of different, I call them grocery lists, right? You give yourself a list, make yourself a list of who your team is, right? Make yourself a list of what shots you want to get. Make yourself a list of what equipment you're going to get it and where you're sourcing that equipment, right? Make a list of your all your locations where you're going to go shoot with the addresses and maps and driving directions on how to get there, and then make sure your team has all that. So it's not like, hey, let's go get our shoot. Well, we're 45 minutes late because we're waiting for, Julian and Serena to show up, and they didn't get the address, and we're texting them frantically. Oh, no, we're here. No, you don't want to do that on the day. You want everybody to know where they're supposed to be at what time. So your people that you're recording, your actors, your talent, don't have to wait. Right? Everybody has everything, has the plan figured out. Everybody has the shopping list that they're trying to get. You might have costumes or props or what special effects, and most importantly, a budget, right? Have your budget worked out, how much money is going to what element of what, right? So finally, you're going to have a shooting schedule. Your shooting schedule is going to tell you, we're going to be at this place on this date, and we're going to get these shots at this place on this day. And then you work it out from there. And sometimes it might be more than one day, but that's your shooting schedule. So once you've got that all put together, then you might want to start thinking about getting near a camera. So before you do, though, you want to make sure you communicate your plan to your team, right? So if you are your own first audience, your team is your second audience. In this particular case, your team is going to be the first people you communicate your idea to. And if they don't understand your idea, then you're going to have to go back to the drawing board. Just like with science, peer review is important for mass communication, because this allows you to refine your methods. This allows you to streamline your story. This allows you to be able to communicate effectively, right? Important tools for communicating your team are things like a script, your shooting goals, right? Your shot list. If you're good at art, you can draw storyboards with AI illustration now. It makes storyboard illustration a lot easier. Overheads and shot diagrams. I'll show you some examples of those in a minute. If you can't draw, it's okay. You don't have to be able to draw to be an effective visual communicator. It's just one tool, right? You just need to be able to clearly communicate your idea to yourself as well as your team. That's all. It sounded like there was a question. I heard a noise, maybe. All right, anyway. So here's some examples of what storyboards look like. There's an example of what shot lists look like on the right. Actually, those ones, I used to make tons of those. I've done hundreds of these, right? So you have your script page reference, you have the shot number, you have whether it's interior or exterior, what's the shot type. I'll explain what shot types are in a minute, what angle it is, whether there's a move involved, what the audio is, so voiceover in this case versus location audio, who the subject is, what's the action in the shot, so that way people can look at it and just go, bam, right down the line, right? Here's the stuff I'm looking for. This is what we're getting. An overhead shot overhead is showing your team what setups are going to look like, right? Where's the camera in relation to the subject? What is the blocking, right? So blocking is describing what the motion of your subjects are, right? Maybe you're doing a walk and talk. You have a narrator and they're walking to camera and, they're walking along and talking to camera. Who knows? So these are different tools that you can use. You don't have to use all of them. You don't have to use any of them. They're just useful tools in how you can communicate your idea to your team. Because, like I said, it's, it requires peer review. I like to say film production is a team sport. Okay, so the other really important aspect is you want to do your location scout before you go shooting, right? It's incredibly important because if you haven't done your location scout, then you're going to run into some things that might throw you completely off kilter and you won't be able to shoot. And, for example, so you want to, if you can't get there a day or two in advance to scout and take notes for yourself, then arrive on location with sufficient time to scout. Budget yourself at least an hour or maybe two, where you can walk around and look at the site and figure out, where are my shots? What are they going to look like? Is there a bathroom, right? If there's 6 people out here and we're going to be shooting for 6 hours, probably someone's going to need to go to the bathroom at some point. So make sure that you've gotten accommodations for that sorted out. That might mean you have to rent a porta potty for the day. Not always, but or you might need to figure out, like, okay, where's a place where someone can use the toilet? Where can I park, right? Know where you're going to have to hike equipment in from, because, like, if you don't have a big pile of gear, but like I said, say you need to bring your robot to your location to shoot. And whatever equipment you're using to shoot it, right? You're going to have to get it from one place to the next. So you want to have a place to stage your equipment. Where am I going to set? You probably want to bring a folding table. So where can I set up a folding table to set all my gear on it, and where it's not going to be in the shot, and that's not going to be someplace where folks are going to walk by and help themselves to a 5-finger discount, right? It's clean, dry, secure place to work out of the way of foot traffic. Parking, like I said, it's usually the last thing anybody thinks about, but it's one of the first obstacles you're going to encounter. How many cars are going to be present? Do I care if those cars are in the shot? Did you think of that? How many people thought of that? You don't have to do a show of hands, but I just want to make that point. So like I mentioned about bathrooms, break areas, someplace where you can have your team retreat and eat lunch. Because if you're going to be out there shooting this all day, folks are going to get hungry. They're going to need to meet their biological needs, and you need to accommodate for that. You need to think about this in your planning. And then also you're shooting locations, right? What are my backgrounds? Walk around and figure out, wow, this looks really cool. All right, maybe we want to set the robot up here and we want to shoot this shot where this is where we're going to get her out. Oh, wait a minute. Hey, I didn't realize that this was within 100 yards of a freeway, and all that car traffic is going to make it impossible for us to record location audio. So accommodate for that. Right? Maybe we want to use voiceover instead of trying to record what these people are saying. Not the best place for us to shoot an interview, but we can get good B-roll here. And I'll explain what B-roll is a little later too. So that's what I mean. You pay attention to the environment, right? Check the weather report. I had to cancel the shoot on Wednesday because it was a 70% chance of showers, and I didn't have rain gear, and I didn't have a way to accommodate for heavy mud. So I had to cancel the shoot entirely. We're going to shoot it again another time. But pay attention to the location, noisy mechanical things. Is there a irrigation pump within 100 yards of where we're supposed to shoot this interview? Oh no, that's going to make it impossible, right? Is there a lot of wind? Are these things that can be avoided or mitigated? And what are my plans for avoiding or mitigating them, right? Take notes, lots of them. So moving on, you also want to prepare for your interviews. So know what your interview questions are going to be. They call them interview questions or interview prompts. I like to use the word prompts, but I'll use them interchangeably. The whole point is that these are not like, you're not doing research with these questions. You will have done your research before you go out and shoot an interview, right? These are basically used to generate the sound bites you want your subject to say, right? Does this feel contrived? Yes, because it is. This is a contrivance. This is you storytelling. This is not news gathering. This is not journalism, right? Your research for knowing, like, okay, is this an appropriate subject for me to even talk to in the first place, was done before you got out there with the camera. You already know more or less what you're going to try to get that person to say most of the time, not always, but you already know what they're going to say and how they're going to fit, and how, because they're not an actor, I can't just hand them a page and expect that they're going to repeat, they're going to say this in a way that anybody who watches them is going to believe it. So no, I'm going to sit there and talk to them and ask them questions and create a conversation where I'm only going to hear their side of it and hopefully get them to say something about the topic that I want. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So you're only going to be hearing their side of it. The side of it that you're hearing is going to be the sections that you choose. So you really want to create questions that are going to help elicit responses that give you what they want, what they're saying, in as concise a way as possible. Some people go on a long time. I am one of those people. Jot down ideas for follow-ups, because maybe they'll say something that you weren't expecting. You're like, oh, hey, hang on, actually, that's kind of a cool piece. Because you can stop them. You don't have to sit there and be like, let them go on. You can, hey, hang on. Can you say that again? But like, can you maybe say it this way, and then give them a suggestion, right? Or follow up, and if it's practical, some people demand you do this in order to interview them. They want to know what questions you're going to ask and what follow-up points you might ask, and they will not veer off script. Or if you try to, then they'll walk out of your interview. That happens. Not everybody does that. Not everybody's so much of a control freak, but just giving it a heads up. Plan for B-roll, right? So often I'll try to, if I'm going to go shoot an interview and some B-roll, I'll shoot the interview first, because that way I will know what visual context I want to go get, right? I'll have an idea before I go out there what B-roll shots I want to get. But sometimes, they'll say something I wasn't expecting, or they'll refer to something that I only knew about because when I showed up and did a location scout, they might talk about a thing. I'm like, oh, okay, I know. I want to go in and shoot this footage of these oranges because they were talking about orange research. I know for sure I want to go over to the lab where they're storing the clone pieces of orange tree. Cool. I'll go get that, right? So these are all things you're going to use as cutaways. I'll explain that more later. But if you also know you're going to have somebody talking about something historic, you may want to ask them, hey, can you bring some still photos that I can scan? Things like that. Be prepared. As I said, documentaries are not journalism. This is contrivance, right? You are telling a story. Moving on. So let's talk about some visual grammar. I'm trying to keep this as fast as I can. I have a lot to get through. Visual grammar. So I call this the frame, selectively editing reality for fun and profit. Right? As soon as you set a frame, you are committing to alter your audience's perception of reality because you are choosing what is included in that frame and what is excluded from that frame. For example, anything inside the frame should be there because you intend it to be there, right? I intended to have these movie posters in the background. So you all would be like, oh, this is a movie guy, right? I could have framed it like this, so you didn't see my movie posters, right? But no, I wanted to make sure that in my frame on my Zoom, I included movie posters because that told you something about me, right? If I hadn't shown them to you, you wouldn't know they existed. You'd have no idea that I have 5 movie posters in here, right? I showed you 2, and then I told you about 3 others. Anything outside the frame does not exist to your audience unless you tell them it is there, unless you show them it is there, and then you can tell them about other things and hope that they believe you, right? You can use this to your advantage. Anybody ever heard of Chekhov's revolver? The idea of in a Russian play, if there was a revolver that was set on a table in the first act, it would be fired by the end of the second act, right? You're doing something called foreshadowing. The last thing I want to tell you, scene geography is built in the minds of your viewers and is often very different from real geography. The order in which you show things builds the geography. So if you go out one door and then you show your subject going out one door in the room and then entering another door. Anybody ever play the video game Portal? Right? That kind of plays on that idea. The door you come out of may not be the door you go through. So the reason why framing is important is because it is I want you to remember this, these rules of framing. It is your responsibility to make what you show matter to your audience. Do not assume that because it was in the frame, why didn't they see it? Because you didn't show them. You didn't show them why it was important. You framed the shot so wide that, like if you look at the shot of Daniel Craig as James Bond pushed up against the wall with a pistol, right? So imagine that as a wide shot. Imagine like he's tiny in the frame in the background. Well, it isn't going to matter to you because you might be looking at this other thing. You might be looking at the squirrel running across the telephone line. You don't know what your audience is looking at, so you have to control what goes into the frame to show them what matters and what the feelings they might be feeling. So you have to show them what is relevant by making strong framing choices. So the rule number 2, how something is framed matters as much as what is in frame, right? Every choice that you make in the composition framing adds up, and it adds up to evoke an emotional and psychological effect in your audience. And then finally, rule number 3, the worst response from your audience is not a negative emotion. It is indifference. The last thing you want from your audience is, I'll watch something else. There are lots of videos and films that traffic in negative emotion. Anybody ever watch the Saw movies? Right? Lots of horror movies. There's lots of movies that make you feel bad when you walk out of them. Some people like that feeling. That's just how humans be, right? But you don't want them to be indifferent because that means boredom. That means they're not going to watch your movie again. They may not watch anything else that you put out. They may decide, I don't want to see anything from these idiots ever again. The age of social media means that you no longer have a captive audience. Well, you didn't ever really have one, but if somebody bought a movie ticket, then it's kind of hard for them to. I've walked out of movies. I walked out of House of a Thousand Corpses because I got partway through. I'm like, nah, I don't want this. In my brain, I'm leaving. Goodbye. I just gave up on the ticket, right? But now You don't even have that, right? People are looking at on their phone, you bore them, you swipe on to the next thing. So make strong choices so you keep your audience. Build your frame with intent so you keep your audience. So let's talk about some psychology here. The way people look at frames matters. Because we look at what's in focus first, then in human faces or things that look like faces by order of size, and then everything else. The size of the face in frame matters. Angles matter. Bright colors draw attention and offer emotional shading. And you can manipulate these elements to guide your audience's attention to where you want it. The reason I put this here is so, like, the first thing you're seeing is what's in focus, right? The shot begins on this martini glass with a serpentine yellow lemon in it. And then we rack focus to James Bond here, Daniel Craig, looking kind of diaphoretic, which means sort of you got flop sweat, and he's kind of shaking here, and he's looking apprehensive, right? That's communicating something here. Like, even if you haven't seen this movie, this is communicating like, holy crap, did I just drink something that's poisonous, right? There's a lot going on there that I can describe it all I want, but you get that emotional feeling immediately, right? You see what's in focus and then what's out of focus. And then you manipulate these elements to guide your audience's attention. So let's talk about the viewer to subject relationship. I call this the theory of general relativity. Oh, wait, did somebody else get that one? Sorry, I'm going to have to rename that. What I mean in the continuum of relativity in filmic sense here is that objective framing means it is less emotional, it is neutral and observational. It's like watching a play. And a subjective framing is more emotional, it's personal and experiential. So a point of view shot is the most subjective framing. It's putting you right in the shoes of your subject, right? And it doesn't mean that one is better than the other or necessarily stronger than the other. This is just giving you an idea of what's objective versus what's subjective. Now we're going to talk about the hierarchy of your viewer to the subject, okay? So you've got two of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe here on the left. Do they look powerful? No. They look like they're about to get stomped on, like they're a couple of ants or a couple of little kids about to get, a whipping from daddy or something, right? That makes you feel as a viewer in a sense of hierarchy, superiority to these two versus the opposite, right? You're down here. Does it feel these couple of guys? I don't like that feeling. I don't like feeling like they're in a position to be able to do whatever they're going to do because they don't look like they have good intent. And one of them's holding a knife, right? I don't like that. Like, that's a low angle. Sometimes so you can create a sense of powerful. Make your subject feel more powerful by being of a lower angle to them, and you can make your subject feel less powerful by being at a higher angle to them. Well, what if you want to feel on the level to them? Well, you're going to be on the level with your subject, right? Right here, you're here with the dude, Walter and Donnie, having a couple of beers at the bowling alley with the boys. You can also use something called a Dutch angle, where you can make your subject feel like they're off balance, right? They're psychologically or physiologically, like they're not. There's something off kilter with them, so you can do that too. That's something that becomes more and more of a thing as people shoot on their phones using their hands to stabilize their camera, right? You're going to end up with things that are at more or less Dutch angles, so you may want to think about that, right? If it's canted at an angle, am I going to make my subject feel like it's kind of cattywampus, or do I want my subject to feel like they're square and right on, and I want people to pay attention to it? So just giving you that as a heads up. So you can also define what subjects matter by quantity, right? You can do it by the numbers. The key point that I want to make here is the more crap you stick into the frame, the more time your audience has to take to look at it. So the less important any one thing you cram into that frame is, right? You're going to see in the single shot here of Chunk on the left, you're going to feel that is your sole subject. So what they're feeling matters to you more than if you go all the way over to the 3-shot, right? All 3 of them are reacting. Actually, technically, it's a 4-shot because you have the hero coin there too. But 3 shots a human, right? You're looking at these 3 humans here, and you're going to kind of ping pong, like starting from left to right. If you read from left to right, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then you look at their reactions, and look at 3, 2, 1. Go back and look at what they're looking at, right? You're going to see that. So you're spending time to look at this frame. But because there's more stuff in it, you don't engage with anything as deeply as if it was just the one thing, okay? You can also create group shots here on the bottom where you can kind of show, even though these are technically the same movie, you can create different senses by how much stuff is in here, right? So moving on, let's talk about the rule of thirds. We're going to start getting into more esoteric stuff. The rule of thirds is, this is a rule that can be broken, and Wes Anderson breaks it all the time, but the idea is that if things feel somewhat more harmonious if you put them on a third. So if you look at the bottom graphic here of this rock steel, right, it's not following the rule of thirds. It's the left-hand one is symmetrical, but the rule of thirds, if you look at the right-hand one, you've got that rock steel that's on the left third and the horizon's on the bottom third. And you are creating a sense of open sky. You are making a choice, whereas the left-hand one doesn't really make a choice. It kind of splits all of the differences. It favors symmetry over strong choice. Maybe that's what you want. I just want you to see this. Also, you want to give lead room. You can balance your composition. Where your subject is looking and the direction they're facing matters to where you put them in the frame. Now, you might want an unbalanced composition. You might want, like, so you look here and you see Russell Crowe looking to the left, but he's also framed on the left. So it kind of feels like the whole frame is going to tip to the left, right? Or maybe someone's going to pop up behind him. Someone's going to come through that door. Or maybe he's thinking about something in the past, right? But one way or the other, you have all this real estate on the right side of frame. Right? You were making a choice to put that there. Contrast that with, no, she's not Gwen Stefani. My brain stuck the wrong name on her. But either way, she's looking to the left, but she's framed on the right, right? So the direction, the weight of her gaze anchors that so it feels even and level, right? It's going to make sense. So if you flip it around, right, you do a reverse shot, it's going to be from a high angle looking down. The subject is going to be on the left of frame looking up to the right. Okay, so it's going to feel like you're having a conversation, right? But what she's looking at, your audience is going to expect she's going to look at, and that balances the composition. So we can talk about symmetry, right? As I mentioned, Wes Anderson uses this all the time in favor of the rule of thirds, right? So you've got Gene Hackman here, rest in peace, in the middle of the frame, but he's looking frame left, and you've got this sense of symmetry if you could fold it across the middle. This is a strong choice, but your audience is going to engage with it differently than if you're following the rule of thirds. This is one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite gags. He likes to use perspective. And if you're going to frame to create lines of perspective, you're going to need to come down, rather than be at eye height, you're going to need to come down to about chest height. So you can see these lines of perspective. And this is going to create something interesting for your audience by taking a 2D subject, or taking a 2D element and making it look three-dimensional. So this is a cheat. So let's talk about the line. So looking here, does it feel like these two men are talking to each other? How about now? Does it feel like they're talking to each other? That's because of the line of action. If you frame these dudes as you see them on the left, you're going to end up where it doesn't feel like they're engaged with each other at all. You want to make your audience kind of feel like they're in the middle of the conversation looking from one person to the other person, like they're listening to this conversation and turning their head from the left to the right, okay? So this is how you frame it. Look here, you can see the shot on the right is number 2. So you see number 2 I'm pointing and I just realized you can't see my hands. It's not in frame. But this will give you an idea of what the axis of action is and how you want to frame it. And if you cross the line over here where it shows wrong with the X, if you cross the line, then you're going to end up with both your subjects, looking over your shoulder. They're going to be on the same side of frame, looking in the same direction. And then you're going to end up with the top left of these two men not feeling like they're not talking to each other. So you don't want to cross the line of action. You establish your 2 shot of the 2 of them talking, and then you go in for the 2 and the 3, where you frame them on opposite sides, so it feels like you, as the audience member, watching the video, is standing there, turning your head from left to right. Also, these are mounting moves. They're called motion pictures for a reason. if you frame everything static on a wide shot, your audience is going to get bored. So because you can move your camera relative to your subject, it's going to make for a more exciting shot. And these are the name of them. Notice only one of them is called a pan, right? You have other things. So learn what the terminology is. I can make this lecture available for people, but a pan is not a tilt, a pan is not a dolly, a pan is not a truck. Okay, so all of these have specific names, and it's really cool if you use them. So if you're framing a subject moving, like your robot is moving through the field, right? You want to give it some space to move into and track along with them, as opposed to if they are not leading. If this person was on the far left side, you might imagine that they're going to run into something. They might, it looks like they're going to run into the edge of frame. There might be a mailbox that they run into. Your audience is going to want to look to see where they're going, because that's naturally what you do as a human. You don't, if you're running without looking where you're going, you might trip or run into something. So give your audience that sense of comfort by giving your subject space to move into. Same thing without lead room. You can make your subject feel like they're on a treadmill. You don't show them entering or exiting. You just show their feet running. Anybody know what this frame is from? Chariots of Fire. Okay, anyway. So let's talk about the spectrum of emotional importance. This is important to your making choices for framing, right? This is the tighter, if you have a tight framing, like the one here on the left, the subject is the important part, and the emotion that subject is experiencing is the most important thing to your audience. You are choosing to emphasize the subject and the emotion they're experiencing over the action and the setting and the action that's occurring there, right? Because if you're this close to somebody, it really matters how they feel, right? You get right up in someone's face like that, you want to know, are they gonna hit me? Are they gonna kiss me? Why, I'm in this intimate space with this person. So their emotions are something you're going to react to, versus the wide shot, right? You've got a shot here where you can see a person, you get at a general emotional state based on the kind of the set of their body, but you're not going to have as intimate a relationship and an intimate understanding of the emotions that they're experiencing beyond a sort of a general sense. The setting and the action that's occurring in it is of more importance, okay? Versus a medium shot, which is a blend of the two. It's an even balancing of both the subject and the emotion that they're experiencing and the setting and the action that's occurring in it. But if you overuse medium shots, then your audience is going to get bored because you're not committing to any one framing, right? Same thing with if you use nothing but wide shots. Well, when am I going to actually get to have some emotional experience with what I'm seeing? People project their emotions onto things, right? So if you're using lots of close-up shots of your robot and it's doing busy stuff, then people will be like, oh, look how cute, this robot's adorable, it moves around. It does things like a little person does. You can emotionalize something that inherently doesn't have emotions by your framing. So let's talk about the kinds of framing that exists. Right? These are the 9 general types of framing, and these are the terms that you use when you write about it in your shot list. You have an extreme close-up, you have a big close-up, and you have a close-up, okay? Extreme close-ups can be even a little bit dehumanizing because you are focusing really tightly on a single portion of a person's anatomy, right? Their eye, well, they say the eyes are the windows of the soul, but when you get this close-up on someone's eye, then it's kind of like, all right, well, can't really see how they're feeling. Big close-up, wow, this is like, you feel like you're a baby. Right, your baby being held face to face. It's a very intimate relationship there. Close up, same thing. Right? You're still close enough to get a good sense, but you notice as you go through these, the intensity of the emotion diminishes to the point where it's just like, oh, there's some people over there doing things, as opposed to like, I'm right next to this person and this is how they're feeling about me being there, right? So those are the category of close-ups. Categories of medium shots. You've got a medium close-up that usually ends about mid-sternum. It's like you're sitting across a table from somebody. A medium shot ends about the navel, so it's like you're standing across from somebody and you're having a conversation. A cowboy medium shot ends about mid-thigh to tops of the knees, so you're standing apart from somebody, and you want to be able to see what they're doing with their hands. Like they often frame a cowboy medium as if they're sitting on a horse or sitting on a motorcycle. The reason they call this that is because they use cowboy medium shots all the time in cowboy movies, right? Because you want to see his guns, or he's sitting on a horse. Right? So then you've got your wide shot, your full shot, you see somebody from head to foot. You got your wide shot, which is even wider than that, where you see the full figure, but you see how much the character of the setting becomes a character. And then finally, you've got the extreme wide shot, which is like you're sitting in the nosebleed seats at a theater and you're seeing some folks all the way over there doing stuff, right? You have to make your acting much bigger in order to see that. But maybe that's what you want. This is what you want for your setting. You want to establish the setting and the location as a character. Finally, make sure you get lots of insert shots, because this is how you can tell details about your character, details about the story, right? So you got your robot in the field and you want to show little aspects of what it's doing. An insert close-up of its claw, planting a seedling into the dirt, a close-up of the monitor that has the little details about, like, what code is scrolling past. Maybe it's a wheel in the dirt, as it goes along. And you're telling aspects about this thing that your audience can put together in their brain like a puzzle. Like, you're showing these different things that tell parts of the story about your subject. Right here, we've got a picture of Jesus Quintana's shoes. There's something about this, it's telling you something about this guy, because you see all the rings he's got, and he's wearing purple shoes with purple socks. This is telling you something about this character by showing you this close-up. So don't neglect insert close-ups, or what they call cutaways. You use these to call attention to narratively important details that provide context. Okay? You can never record too many cutaways. In fact, get more, and then just know you might not use them all, but get lots of cutaways. Finally, you want to make sure you get an establishing shot so your audience knows where this is taking place in the first place. Right? Anybody watch Seinfeld? They'll establish the scene, or Friends, they'll establish the scene outside the building, and then they'll go into the room in the building. Right? Okay, we're at this coffee shop, and now we're in here, and George and Ellen and Jerry are all having a conversation about a thing, right? So they'll establish the location, and then they'll go into the scene. Okay, it orients your viewers to what's going on, where it's going on, and what's about to happen, right? Whether it's Los Angeles 2019 or New York 1978 or a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away, these are all things that help orient your viewer to what's going on and what story you're about to tell them. So I put this here because this is going to really help dictate your choices, right? Everybody now more or less is having to go through this. Do I shoot landscape? Do I shoot portrait? Okay. Social media has really complicated this particular choice, because most social media platforms demand a portrait framing, right? But if you're an older person like me and you grew up with television and movies, you grew up with a landscape framing, and it feels weird to adapt to a portrait framing. But the younger you get, the more you're like, oh, I have this as a framing option, and I have this as a framing option. Problem is, they're not compatible. You can crop in post. You can crop a landscape video in post to make it look like portrait mode, but you can't go the other way without generative AI, at least. And who has time to do that? There's only so much fiction that I feel like you can ethically cram into a video and still call it right. But in this particular case, you can't create something that wasn't there. Like, if you look at my video framing here, you can crop me to be in portrait mode, but you can't crop a portrait. You can't add data to turn it into a landscape. So if you know you're only ever going to use your footage in social media, like ever, it's not going to be used anywhere else. I'm not going to put this up on YouTube. I'm not going to send this out to, whatever it is. I'm only ever going to show people on social media. Go ahead and shoot it in portrait. If you know that if you suspect you might use it elsewhere, then shoot in landscape and crop it. Shoot it wide enough that you can crop it and make it look like it was shot in portrait mode. If you have the option, and I've been doing this increasingly myself, shoot both at the same time, right? Set up one camera, have one of your camera operators shooting on landscape in the framing that you want, that's optimized for the viewers that you have on landscape, and then shoot simultaneously on your smartphone in portrait setting and frame for that. So you don't have to re-record the same action multiple times or re-record the same interview multiple times, right? You're shooting on two cameras, and the framing is optimized for the two different distribution venues. I hate this. I hate the fact that I have to shoot 3 cameras at a time, because I always shoot 2 cameras on different framing so I can intercut. And now I'm shooting 3 cameras. I've got 2 cameras, and I've got a thing that I'm shooting on my phone. Anyway. So just giving you folks a heads up, make sure you shoot, if you're going to shoot and you're releasing across multiple platforms and you only have one camera, shoot in landscape on a wide framing, full shot or a wide shot, at a high enough resolution that you crop it and that it's still acceptable when you take it in post. So there's some technical considerations. Lighting is important, and I'll tell you why, right? You need to three-dimensionalize a two-dimensional object. You need to know where the sun is relative to your subject, and you don't want them staring into the sun. I know you don't want the sun directly overhead, and you'll see all that why in a second. You may want to take something that you can use as a fill panel, right? So they're not like, all right, if you look at this top left picture where it says key, you might have the sun keying them really hard, and the whole side of their face, the whole right side of their face on the left side of frame is in shadow. So you're going to need to do something to fill in the shadows, which is why it's called fill. And you may want to separate them from their background by giving them some kind of backlight. You may not have the luxury to do that, but I just want you folks to think about this, right? If you building your frame with intent. Also talking about hard versus soft light. The harder the light is, the more direct the light is, the more shadows it creates. If you have something to soften the light somewhat, you can spread it out so that it fills in the other side of their face. If it's directly overhead, if it's under them, you get they call horror lighting. If it's directly overhead, it kind of gives them what I call raccoon eyes, or kind of makes them feel sort of emotionally detached. Warm light versus cool light. So that's going to, again, provide some emotional shading to your shots. So think when you're setting up the lighting or you're looking at the lighting in frame, the quality, direction, and color of the light on your subject. Also, white light ain't white. You think it's white because your brain's telling you it's white, right? But it isn't. You come inside, and everybody have that experience. You've been outside in the sunshine, you walk inside, and all the lights are on in the room, but gosh, everything sure looks orange. Well, it's because your brain has told you that color is white light, this color is, and you come in and your brain hasn't adjusted yet. Well, you have to tell your camera's brain what color white is. So you'll notice that tungsten bulbs, or what they call warm interior lights now on LED, are going to be more orange. Daylight's going to be more blue. Fluorescence going to be more green. So most of your phones, if you set it on auto white balance, things are going to look kind of weird. So you may want to make sure that you set your camera to match the correct color temperature for where you're operating. So most phones and most cameras have these little symbols now, rather than you having to remember, a specific number. They'll just show you, okay, am I in daylight, or am I around fluorescent lights, or am I around interior bulbs? I'll pick the right symbol that matches the lighting environment you're in, so that things don't look weird, they don't look blue or orange. And I know you don't have money. I don't have a ton of money. Why spend money if you don't have to? Go to the hardware store, go to the office supply store, get some foam core presentation boards, staple some tin foil to the backside of that presentation board so you can use it as a soft fill or a hard fill. You can get some plastic sheeting that you can use to spread over lights in the room. Don't put the plastic sheeting on garage work lights or you're going to get a fire. I just want to say that now. The sun's usually your brightest keying option, so figure out where the sun is, where the windows are letting in the most light, and orient your subject to that in such a way that you don't want the light coming from behind them, because you don't want them in silhouette, and you don't want them staring into the light so they're having to squint, right? You want to have it on one side or the other. So, I'm going to talk about sound real quick. Actually, let me see where we are on our time. We're making good time. So, the secret sauce to your videos, believe it or not, is sound. If you have good sound, but bad video, people will look at it. They'll still watch it, even if the camera is garbage. They can still hear it well enough, but they won't tolerate it the other way. You might have beautiful framing, but if the sound is crap, folks aren't going to watch it. Like, well, wait a minute, how does that work? Well, that's just the way psychology works. Like, for the most part, if your sound is terrible, folks are going to turn away, and if they're hearing impaired, they'll probably stay and watch it. But this is the point that I want to make, is that you want to get good quality sound. It is as important, if not more, than good framing. There is no sound repair tool that is a substitute for getting clean audio in the first place. So the rule for this is garbage in, garbage out. If you get garbage audio on location, you're not going to be able to clean it up, and it's going to sound like garbage in post. So make sure you get it clean. There's two kinds of field audio. You've got program audio, which is what is recorded with a microphone that is dedicated to the subject. I have a microphone right here on me that is picking up my audio. Now it is not. So there's a difference between this, and there's a difference between this, right? I point the mic away from me. This microphone is dedicated to getting my audio versus a microphone that is set on the top of my laptop and is picking up all the environmental audio as well as the stuff that's specific to me, right? So it's going to hear the fan going in the other room. It's going to pick up all the noises coming in from outside. It's all that other stuff. This microphone that I'm wearing is program audio. Reference audio is recorded by a built-in microphone on your phone or your camera, and you really only ever use that to synchronize your video to your program audio. Don't rely on reference audio. But if you, for some reason, your program audio craps out and the only thing you have is your reference audio, at least you have something so it's not a silent movie. So make sure if you're using whatever program audio you're using, it's important to check all of your connections to make sure you're getting good, clean program audio. You're probably going to want to take a set of headphones, plug it in, and listen. Or record a little chunk of it. So not all phones give you the option, if you're recording on your phone, not all phones give you the option of being able to monitor the audio stream that it's recording from your peripheral. So record a little chunk, play it back, make sure you're getting your program audio as opposed to the reference audio. Okay, so some field audio things I want to go over. Make sure you try to conceal your mic because an overly visible mic can break the metaphor. You don't want your audience paying attention to the equipment as opposed to the person who is talking on the equipment. Folks make a joke about audio files, right? It was the guy from the Alan Parsons. If you all know who Alan Parsons is from the Alan Parsons Project, he made a joke about people who like music use equipment to listen to music. Audiophiles use our equipment to use our music to listen to their equipment. So you don't want people paying attention to the equipment. You want the equipment to be as invisible as possible in order to immerse your audience into the video. If they're using a wearable mic, you're going to want if you put this on your subject, if they're going to use like a lavalier mic or something I have, you want to make sure you check with them before you reach out to their body to put something on them, right? If somebody lunges toward my neck with both hands, I'm not going to like that, right? So if they say, hey, I have a microphone, I'd like to put this on your collar, if it's okay. And if they say, no, I'll put it on myself, respect that. Okay, cool, no problem, right? Be aware of hide cables. Be aware of jewelry or fabric that might rub against the microphone and figure that out. I've had interviews where I had a subject wearing a chunky necklace that was clonking against the lavalier mic that I had on him, and I had to say, okay, I got to stop and I need to move that mic because it's just ain't working. Use a pop filter because you may notice that if I pop my P's, and then I take the microphone over here, I'm getting a wind hit on the mic, right? That's called a pop. That's called a pop, right? You can get little foam covers, right? That is not a wind. That doesn't protect against wind, but it'll protect it against a P pop and other hard breath hits. If wind is an issue, you can get something. Sometimes they call them a dead cat. Sometimes they call them a softie. It's a big fluffy furry thing that goes over the microphone, and that will mitigate wind, most of wind, as long as it isn't over say 15 miles an hour. Make sure you monitor the audio quality. Make sure you monitor the levels. So wear a set of headphones or have a dedicated person on your team whose job it is to pay attention to audio. And just like if you have a dedicated person on your team whose job it is to pay attention to framing your shot and recording solid video, make sure you have a person who is paying attention to the audio, who can say, hey, actually, hang on, we got to cut. I've got a plane flying over and we can't hear the interview because the plane's killing all the audio, so we have to wait for plane. Those different things. Be aware of things in environments that you may not normally pay attention to, like HVAC systems or leaf blowers or lawn mowers, machine fans, aquariums, things that make noises that are, especially if they have an inconsistent noise of waxing and waning volume, You're never going to be able to remove that. It always feels like you get out to start record an interview in a suburban neighborhood, and you're like, dude, why did everybody have to come out with a leaf blower right at the time that I started recording? Well, you just didn't notice that there were people out there with leaf blowers before you started recording. And you put on the headphones, and you're like, oh man, this sounds like I can't hear this person over the leaf blower, right? Or the lawnmower. So you want to try to silence those items if you can, right? So yes, that includes refrigerators if you're recording in somebody's kitchen. So you're going to have to turn off the refrigerator so it doesn't cut on in the middle of your recording, because you're not going to be able to remove it later. So one of the tricks to that is you take your car keys and you put it in the refrigerator when you turn it off, so you can't leave sight without turning the refrigerator back on. Old sound guy trick there. Because you don't want your subject calling back being like, hey, you turned off my refrigerator and everything's spoiled. I am never doing anything with you again. In fact, I am going to retract my permission for you to use my likeness. Oh, man. That guy's whole Costco order went bad. All right, so you want to this is all part of trying to get it clean so you don't record it in post. You cannot remove environmental sounds from program audio. So especially sudden and unexpected sounds, where you're in the middle of a recording and then the next door neighbor fires up their lawnmower, or a dog starts to bark. Somebody with a Hemi, 340 Hemi drives past and steps on your audio. You're just going to have to cut and wait for that sound to clear and then start again and re-record. Sometimes you have to bribe people, right? I've done this. I've been that guy on set where they just handed a bunch of petty cash to, and you had to go over to somebody like a neighbor who fired up their lawnmower. Hey, you lay off for about half an hour. Here's $40. Oh yeah, sure, man. Not going to get a lot of purchase if they're like a hired lawn crew, because they're already getting paid. But anyway, sometimes I've had to do that more than once. Silence matters as much as sound. Every time you're finished recording in a location, make sure you before anybody moves, before you pack up any equipment or anybody walks away, to record 30 seconds of tone. So when you cut that interview together and there's some gaps in, you can put that underneath it so it doesn't sound like there's gaps in the audio, right? The tone is the baseline environmental sound in a given recording environment. And the best way to get it is after you're done recording your thing, have everybody just stand still and silently for 30 seconds and record the environmental audio. And it does sound different. Once people start moving away and picking up gear, then there's not, it does sound different. General principles of working with a microphone: they work like a flashlight. So you point it at what you want to illuminate. The closer it is, the brighter it'll be. It should always be pointed at your subject's mouth and placed as close as possible to it without interfering with the framing. Handheld microphones are often a very convenient choice, but also can make something feel artificial. It's most intrusive, so it kind of has that man on the street type interview. Subjects without camera or media training are going to feel uncomfortable if they're holding a microphone. They're not going to hold it right. They're supposed to hold it like this, and then they're going to just come down here, and then you're not going to get any good audio. Boom microphones are another good choice. Lavalier is the best choice, honestly, because they're the easiest to work with, especially these little Bluetooth lavs. And we talked about lav placement. So if you can get a set of lavs, great. I highly recommend these here on the right, the Rode Wireless Pro set. You get 2 transmitters and a receiver, and then each of the transmitters you can record audio directly to the transmitter. You can then pull the audio files off the transmitter. So if you're like, hey, okay, I can't actually connect this to my camera or my phone, but I still want to get good program audio, that's your shot right there. $400, hell of a, it's really, really worth it. It also comes with its own charging case and lavalier microphone cables. It is an absolute steal for $400. If you tried to get that from Sennheiser or some of these other ones that have been the industry leaders prior to this, those would cost you a minimum of $1,500, maybe $2,000. So make sure you have a good set of headphones to listen to them. These are the ones I recommend. Sony makes good ones, so does Rode. If you want to get a Zoom recorder, both of these are obsolete now. You can't get them anymore except used, but they're also quite useful, and I do recommend them because I've used them with success. Other things you may want to think about is stabilizing your camera so you don't have something that looks like the Blair Witch Project, which apparently nobody knows what that movie is anymore, so I should probably stop making that reference. Use a monopod or a tripod if you can to stabilize your shot. If you don't have that, gimbals are also a good choice, but they can be a little expensive and they run on battery. You can also use a dolly setup. The problem is they're big, heavy, and inconvenient, but you can get nice, stable, smooth moving shots. But think about how you're going to stabilize your shot, because nobody really wants to look at something that's going to give them motion sickness. So let's also talk about file format. One of the things you need to have in your brain, I really, really want to stress this, is that if you're shooting on your smartphone does not have a consistent frame rate. It'll tell you it has a consistent frame rate. Well, I mean, I set it to 2398. I set it to 30 FPS. It doesn't have a consistent frame rate. No smartphone does. It's part of it has to do with the way they compress the video in order to fit it on a smartphone, right? It does a bunch of folding, spindling, and mutilating of the video data in order to be able to keep it from blowing up your phone's storage. So you're going to have to get it into Adobe Media Encoder or a similar thing to get it into a stable frame rate. You have to run it through that pass first before you want to start editing with it. Otherwise, you're going to pull your hair out. The other thing I want to make a point is a lot of phones and a lot of cameras give you the option to shoot in a higher resolution than 1080p. At a minimum, you need to shoot at 1920 by 1080 progressive. That's what they call standard HD. If you shoot anything less than that, folks aren't going to stand for it. It's going to feel pixelated. Folks are going to joke about it. They're not going to watch it. Maybe that's what you want. If that's what you want, great. Maybe that's the emotion you're trying to evoke in your audience, is a sense of frustration and derision. But generally, that's not the emotion that I'm going for. So I shoot in standard HD at a minimum. If you can shoot at a higher resolution, shoot at 2K or 4K, and that way you're giving yourself some options to reframe your shot if you need to later without losing finishing resolution. So you probably finish in 1080p. That's usually fine. Most folks don't care if it's in 4K or in 1080. Okay, shooting in 2K or 4K gives you the option to play with your footage in post without ruining the expectations of your audience. The problem is that if you shoot at 4K, you're going to have some Mondo huge, enormous files. So make sure that you're taking that into account. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that iPhones shoot in a different format from Android phones. So they tend not to play well in the same environment. If you have, try to keep it consistent. If you're shooting everything on an Android, if your team is shooting on Android phones, make sure you shoot only Android phones. Because if you go from iPhone to Android, you're going to have to do some conversion from an MOV to an MP4. You're going to have to use different. You're going to have to convert from ProRes to H.264. There's a bunch of again, folding, spindling, and mutilating of data in order to be able to get it to play well in the same sandbox. And if you don't have access to high-end editing software, you're not going to be able to make those conversions. So just make sure you know what you're shooting on. And then, so let's talk about frame rate. Why is frame rate important? Well, this is, you don't always want to shoot at the highest frame rate, especially if you're shooting at 4K. If you're shooting at 4K 60 FPS, you are shooting 60 4K images every second, as opposed to shooting 24 4K images every second. So your data, your file size is going to be a lot smaller. But also, if you don't need slow motion, you don't need to shoot at 50 or 60 FPS. The reason is that if you are shooting, your basic expectation is at 24 FPS. That's movies and television for most people. If you shoot at 50 FPS and you play something that you shot at 50 FPS back at 24 FPS, it's going to take twice as much time to show them. So it's going to be slowed down by a factor of 50%. Because you're showing the same amount of data, but you're having to take twice the amount of time to show that same amount of data. If you're playing it back at 50 FPS, it's going to feel normal. If you play it back at 24 FPS, it's going to be 50% slow motion. It's going to be half the normal appearing speed. Does that make sense? So the only problem is that you can't expect to turn something shot in 24 FPS into slow motion. It's going to feel weird and jerky because you're having to duplicate every single frame. So some people want to show slow motion aspects of what they're doing. Maybe that's important to them. Maybe they want to shoot everything at 60 FPS, or 50 FPS, and then, go through and convert some of their things to be at 24, and then show slow motion when slow motion is necessary. I usually plan that stuff out. I plan my slow motion shots so I don't fill up my phone with a bunch of extraneous data. You don't want to mix footage shot at different frame rates in the same project. You don't. It's a headache. If you're shooting across multiple cameras, make sure the settings are the same on each camera. Other considerations, iPhone footage is excellent, looks very, very, very beautiful, and can intercut really well with high-end cameras like Blackmagic or Arri Alexa. You have to transcode the footage into the stable frame rate. If you're shooting at high resolution at a high frame rate, you're going to blow up the storage on whatever it is you're shooting on. So make sure you back it up regularly. This may mean that if you're shooting, let's say you're shooting a 6-hour day, shoot the first 3 hours on one phone and then switch out for the duplicate phone. So you say, okay, I'm shooting this in an iPhone, I don't know, iPhone 15, I don't know what number they're up to now. So whatever it is you shoot it on for the first half of the day, make sure you have another iPhone 15 to shoot the next 3 hours of footage on so that you can back the first one up and save that. So if it goes bad, and this does happen, right? Solid state drives fail. Memory cards fail, right? Any number of things could happen. It gets dropped, into the ocean and you lose your footage, whatever, right? You at least have half your day and you can go back and shoot the rest of the stuff later. You don't lose your whole day. The more frequently you back up your footage, like the more frequently you schedule yourself breaks during the day to back up the footage from whatever you're shooting on, the more successful you're going to be, the more protected you're going to be in case there's an accident or a failure. So build that into your schedule, time for you to back stuff up off of your phone. If you just shoot all day on the same object and then rely on that, at some point it's going to fail and then you are going to be a very sad person. The other problem is that iOS, I want to tell people about this. It's really, really important. The other thing about shooting on iPhones is they hide your data from you because they want you to buy a subscription to iCloud. And if you shoot stuff over, 3 to 4 minutes, it gets over a certain file size, it's really hard to find it on a phone to then push it off onto a backup drive. It plays a little shell game with your data, because it wants you to push it up to the cloud and pay for a cloud subscription to then have access to your own data. So keeping that in mind, try not to let any individual clip that you record exceed 3 minutes if you're shooting on an iPhone, so that you can actually back your data up and have access to it without having to buy a subscription. If you have a subscription to iCloud and you don't care, fine. Just want to give you that heads up, though. That was a personal thing that I experienced this last summer that sucked. Also, the other thing I want to make a point about is data management is important. Make sure you back your data up in at least 2 different places, and I mean physical places, right? You record it, the thing that you record on does not count as one of those. Back the thing up onto one drive, back it up from that same recording medium to another drive. Don't just copy one drive to the other, because there may have been an error in recording to the first one that gets copied to the second one. Give yourself a minimum of 2 external hard drives. You want to have USB 3.0 or USB Type-C or Thunderbolt, because it's a lot of data that you have to push. As I mentioned, download footage regularly from your camera, an audio recorder, and then make sure that you organize it really well so that it's not hard for you to find or for your team to find once you get into editing. So if we're going to talk about editing, when I was talking about A-roll and B-roll, okay? A-roll is the talking head talking. B-roll is what the visual context for what the talking head is talking about, right? It's the reason I picked this shot. It should be fairly obvious, right? I'm not saying the pyramids were built by aliens, shots of the pyramids, but it was aliens. Let me tell you, it really was aliens, right? So you're showing these are the cutaways you're using to provide visual context for your story. Editing begins when you start planning your shot list. I have a lot more that I can go over, but I want to pause here for a second because I think we're getting thin on time. We are at 11,
we got
16.
15 minutes.
15
Ethan.
minutes. So I want to analyze this video. So before we jump to looking at the Hawaii team video, I'll break this down and tell you what they did well, what they didn't, what I think they could have done better, and then I will have a couple of minutes for questions. I know this is a lot. This is I'm available for anybody to email with questions. So eireland@ucanr.edu. I'm perfectly happy to answer questions. I love talking about this stuff. So if you're like, hey, hey, what was that thing you told me about? Can everybody see this? Is this the correct thing? The University of Hawaii Manoa Team Aina?
It looks good.
Great. All right. I'm going to play it back now. So,
Not hearing the audio.
yeah, I just made an error on that. Let me fix that. Just a moment, please. I forgot that it doesn't auto share unless I tell it to share audio. Bum, 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 bum. Advanced sharing options, yada, yada. Oh, thanks for putting that there, Kelly. Who can share, host sharing, blah, blah, blah.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to interject real quick and say to the group that why we're going through all this graduate level course in video production is because your video is really your first impression with the judges. So if you can tell your story in an emotional, compelling way, it's really going to set your project apart from the others in the competition. So that's where this whole conversation is grounded. There's a lot of stuff here, and I would say you certainly on your teams probably want to assign somebody to lead this portion. I think that's going to be really important. And if you don't have the talent or somebody that's interested in this, recruit somebody else on your team that does. You're at colleges, universities, even some high schools on this call that probably has some kind of media unit that you can connect to, or students that are doing this already at the school. So bring them on, let them use their expertise to help you tell your story, because that's going to help you in the competition. So that's the framing for this whole conversation. I'll let you back to you, Ethan.
Absolutely. I have to concur with what Kelly said, particularly if you're getting into business pitching. More and more people want to have a nice, slickly produced video that they can watch as your pitch, as opposed to you just pitching them. So, all right, where did I put share? There's share. Okay. Screen one. All right. And share. We're running thin on time, so I'll just narrate this. We won't worry about the audio. We'll just look at the shots, and we'll worry about audio. Even though I said audio was important, I'm going to have to forego this if we're going to get through it. I have a meeting immediately right after this. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's look at this first shot here. Right, they've got their graphics. They've got they've got their text here. I would have gone for something that was a little more engaging than that, but that's okay. They have a nice soft focus aerial shot here. That we're seeing that grounds you immediately and like, oh, okay, cool. We got a shot that's now terrestrial, and we're seeing the thing in the drone. We're seeing what looks like a point of view shot, right? And then they cross cut to the robot, right? They give this right here. They go from what looks like a point of view shot of the robot to what the robot's moving through. So that's a good little piece of editing right there. Okay. So this shot here, this is a good establishing shot, but they hold on this through the whole interview. I would have established this, and then I would have gone in tighter, or I would have shot this on two cameras, where I have one that's at this framing. The other thing is they haven't, you notice how he's framed right in the middle. Now, they may not have had a lot of choice on this, because who knows what was outside of frame on the left or the right. And they wanted to catch all of these bits and pieces of like the stuffed animals, but they still have his eyes. And they still have too much headroom, and they still have his eyes on almost in the middle of the frame. They have him dead center of the frame, and then he's looking off to his left. I would have framed this much differently. I'm spending more time looking at his surroundings than I am looking at him and listening to the story that he's telling. So I would, if I had this as an establishing shot, I would have punched in a little tighter, hung on it for just a few seconds, and then gone into a close-up for him. Just want to give you that. All right, so we're going to watch this interview. He's going to go through. He's just providing this some B-roll that's telling you, because you hear his voiceover here, not his voiceover, you're hearing his interview, and they're providing this. Now we have this here, that shot. I mean, who knows why they did this way? It looks like they were hand holding this on a gimbal, and they have this footage of this. So we've now established this person here in the left of the frame as somebody. Is this somebody that we need to pay attention to? I don't know. Do we ever see her again? Actually, no. So why is she in the shot? Okay. If this had been me, I would have said, hang on, I'm going to cut, me reframe this. And then I would ask him, okay, can you pick up from what you're saying? And with his framing correct. Because I feel like that takes away from it. This pan over doesn't do a whole lot to add to the shot. In fact, it detracts from it. Also notice you're looking at that thing. What is that thing sitting on his shirt? What is that thing? Right? It's got a fluffy top on it. I have no idea what that is. Is it going to attack him? Oh, it's a microphone. Okay, but we've got this great little shot of B-roll of some of the traditional harvesting equipment that's providing context for the story that he's thinking about. Again, dead center of the frame, whole lot of things, got somebody moving around behind him. Now, this is a much better framing for an interview, okay? You've got him in a medium shot. He's telling a story. You've got the subject of what he's talking about, the pineapple fields, off to one side. That he's looking in the direction of. You've got some B-roll where you've got this pulling out, establishing the vastness of the pineapple field that cuts away from what he's talking about. This kind of goes on a little longer. These shots are good. They're providing some context for what he's talking about. But the problem is they're out of focus, right? So what's in focus here? The cars, some of the field, but the subject, which is close to me, is out of focus. I would have reshot that, or I wouldn't have used that shot in editing. So that's one thing that detracts from this. But I appreciate what they're doing here. The other thing I would have done is I would have made sure that I could see the entire pineapple from top to bottom. So I would have framed out a little bit wider, and I wouldn't have had this person with the camera in frame, right? I'd have elected to have that person out of frame, or move myself over in such a way that person was no longer in frame. Same problem with this shot. Okay, this doesn't linger on it long enough to show you it's off axis, so you notice the horizon is not level, and he's out of focus. So I would have fixed that as well. I appreciate that they're getting the traditional Hawaiian shaka gesture and the guy's holding a pineapple, but I really would have wanted that frame to be level and in focus. But this is still a really good framing, right? As they're talking to this guy, they're panning to keep him in frame. They cut across here for this moving shot through the pineapple fields to provide some context for what they're talking about, so people can see, oh wow, pineapples grow on like this. All right, cool. Since you can't hear what he's saying, the one thing I would have made different is I would have given him just a little bit more headroom. Same thing here. I would have gotten a little bit more headroom so we could see the entire top of that. Of the robot. So, but it's a good shot showing you the robot in context with the people who are developing it and the field in which it's going to be operating. This is a good shot too. This is an over the shoulder showing they're talking about, like, all right, we're developing what the robot is seeing. I would have slid over to this guy's right and punched in a little bit tighter, so it was just mostly the guy doing the development and the frame. The pineapple, if I wanted the pineapple in frame, I probably would have slid it over to the center of the table or to the left of the laptop. I would have framed out all this stuff here on the left side of frame and tried to frame out all this stuff here and mostly just focus on the subject, which is the dude and his laptop with the pineapple on it. But it's still a good shot. It's still a good choice of shot, right? So now we have let me back it up. Now we have a shot. I would have come over his shoulder a little bit more, made sure he was in focus, but this is still a good shot providing context for the dude flying the drone, gathering the data.
Did we lose you, Ethan?
No, I'm here. I don't know why the audio cut out there and why we lost the share, but it did.
Okay.
1 second. Let's go back. Okay, here we are. So I thought this was actually a cool little sequence here. So we go for the dude flying the drone, gathering the data. We have the drone's eye view with the data overlay, and then we have the exterior shot where we find the drone, so people will connect in their brain that, oh, I just saw that's what the drone's getting. We've got the robot moving through, gathering data. We've got the dude herding the robot, showing them going through and doing construction. I would have framed this out a little bit wider so you could see more of it without parts of it getting cut off. But still, again, providing good context, a nice moving shot to keep your interest. This shot's a little dead. I don't know what they're showing me here when it says video frames extracted from the robot. I would have done this a little bit differently. Or I don't know. It works for the way that it is, though. I would have actually used extracted frames from the robot. That's good. This is good. Again, providing context for the programming aspect of what they're talking about. They're showing you what it looks like as they're going through and programming. That's all really good. So you're getting screenshots of actual action. This I feel like this is a little dead. That's okay. Right here we've got a great overhead view taken clearly from aerial photography. And they're showing you, they're describing this process. This is all really good. So you've got a narrator voiceover, which I know y'all can't hear right now, but the voiceover is explaining this process of them developing. This is all really good visual context for that. I'm going to jump forward now. Okay, so they're talking about stitching process. They're showing object detection. They're showing, yeah. So all this is they're showing you the process from screenshots. Now this is I wish I could get the audio situation sorted out here. This is good. If I wanted to show him, I would have put him on the other side, right? So he's framed decently. We've got him in a medium shot. But I would have put him on the other side of the table so he's not just in front of this white wall. I would have put him in front of and to the left of the table that we see here in left frame. And I would have backed him off the wall. Maybe they didn't have space in the room to do that. The other thing is, and you can't hear it, his audio is really roomy. They're using the onboard, when I'm roomy as in like you hear this, you hear the room, all the bounce of the sound off the walls. They don't have any program audio for this shot. So unfortunately you can't hear it, but it makes it, kind of breaks the metaphor a little bit. I want it to be nice and clear and as the narrator's voice is. But he does provide a good explanation. The shot is framed decently, and it's decently enough for people to, connect all the dots. And it's, I don't know, I might have also shot an alternate angle of being a little bit tighter, so I could cut away in case he stutters or something. You want to give your interview subject as much room as they can to make mistakes, which is why I always shoot 2 cameras on an interview subject, or almost always. And then we have the wide shot at the end of the whole team with their contact information, so that really, you can see the robot and the whole team and everything like that. That's a decent frame. The only thing that I would have fixed about this is I would have made the frame level. It's off kilter. The team looks level, but the wall behind them doesn't, so your audience is going to look at that. And there's that. All right, so we are almost just about at time. I have about a minute for questions or feedback.
Well, we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, Ethan. I just want to let you know I posted the link to the Hawaii video, and the rest of the group that is here, they were a top winner last year. They did an excellent job. The videos from the other competitors last year are also on the website. So definitely something to check out, see how different people did things. Now you have a good kind of baseline knowledge in how you can really start to plan and think through what you want to capture. And I think, Ethan, you're 1, 2, 3. Can you go over those again, what they were that you want to get people to get from this webinar?
Yes. So number 1, plan. That's the number 1 thing. Make sure you plan out what you're trying to do before you go pick up a camera. The number 2 thing is build your frame with intent, right? Number 2 is build your frame with intent. And finally, make strong choices. If you make too many compromises, and it's going to feel like your shots were designed by committee, and you're not going to have any emotional impact on your audience. You want your audience to come away with an emotional impact, so make sure you make strong choices. And what I mean by build your frame with intent, as in don't include things in your frame that don't need to be there that are going to distract your audience. Okay, so we saw that in the interview sequence that was taking place in the Dole plant. The guy had the microphone sitting on his shirt with the fuzzy top on it, and all the other stuff that was in the frame behind him. So rather than paying attention to him and what he's saying, you're looking at the inflatable banana, you're looking at the stuffed animals, you're looking at the Dole posters, you're looking at the lady moving around in the background who keeps looking back at the camera to see what you're doing. You're paying attention to everything else in the frame but what the guy is saying and whether it's relevant to what you're thinking about.
Looks like you do have a couple questions here. If you have a second, Ethan,
Yeah,
what is
lay
a
it on
good
me.
introducing shot?
What's a good intro? Sorry, what's that? Say it
What's a
again.
good introducing shot?
Okay, so that's called an establishing shot. We had a really good establishing shot at the beginning of that video, right? We had an establishing shot that was was slightly out of focus, but you had the graphic thrown on top of it, and you had an aerial shot over the pineapple fields. And we cut out of that. We had an establishing shot of the robot in the fields with the drone in the background behind it. That immediately told you, I'm out in the field. I have a robot in the field. I'm in a pineapple field. Tells me where I am. Where do they grow pineapples in the United States? Hawaii.
Yeah. I know you have to leave. I
No,
can
it's
take the
okay.
next question
Take
for
no, I
you,
can
but
take a
it's
couple more questions before I bail
okay.
out.
There's one more. What are the elements that you think we should absolutely nail in our video submissions? And I'll answer the first part of that. Um, the core purpose of your robot, of your solution, make sure that you showcase that really well. There was a video last year, I remember, where they set up the whole project, but then when it got to the execution of what the robot did, the frame was blurry, things weren't in focus, and you couldn't really capture what the essence of their solution was.
Yeah.
So if your robot does a thing, make sure that you capture that thing
You
really
can see
well.
the thing.
Yeah.
And show the thing in detail. You know, you don't like there was one of the teams had a robot that had a little soil auger and then would an arm that would plant it, right? I really wished I had seen that on a close-up where you have the robot drive up and start to deploy the auger. I really wanted there to be an insert shot of the auger going into the dirt and then the plant getting planted. Like, if you're gonna, whatever aspect it is of your robot, you want to make sure you show those aspects and make them matter, make them important to your audience. And unless you show those things on a close-up, and show the detail of what's going on, your audience isn't necessarily going to matter. They're going to be looking at this wide shot of the robot doing the thing, but they're going to be bored by it. You have to make it important. Show what's important about what's going on in that moment. Same thing goes with the other thing I would say that's really important to do is if you're going to do an interview with a person, make that interview as good as it can be. So of the two interviews that we saw, one was the dude in the field. That framing was really good. The framing of the scientist that they were talking to, or engineer, or whatever he was, the older guy with the glasses, needed a little bit more headroom. But otherwise, it was a really good interview, right? They have his sequence. He's framed decently. You're engaged with what he's saying. They're providing B-roll as context for what he's saying. Fantastic. The other guy, was interesting, but again, like I said, I don't want to beat on what they did wrong, but I really wished it had been framed better, and I was able to engage with what that guy was saying more because, my own attention deficit problems were having my eyes ping-ponging all around frame. Assume your audience has attention deficit disorder and guide their focus to what they're looking at for them, right?
Okay. I think we're pretty much good. Ethan, thank you so much.
Is
Um,
Ethan involved in the judging process? No.
no.
I might edit your video at the end after they've made the judging. I might edit a super cut. But I'm not a judge.
Yeah, so Ethan is going to help us with the production of the final awards ceremony. That's where his expertise shines.
Yeah, such as it is.
Yeah. Well, this session will be recorded. Ethan, I'd love to get those slides from you so that we could share them with the group. We'll get it posted up on YouTube so you can reference it and share it with your other team members as you like. So,
And this is the short version. You got the truncated one. When
yeah,
you get the actual
we
PowerPoint,
did
there's a lot
whittle
more
it
that we
down
didn't
quite a
talk
bit.
about.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ethan. Really appreciate everything. And thank you all for tuning in today. And best of luck with your projects out there. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. See you later.